First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to be a speaker. I was a little intimidated when asked to speak about this because I do know that there's people who are much more experienced at doing international collaborations in the audience than I am, but it's a real pleasure to be speaking. I'll just say that Aisha tried hard to be here, even trying to link up through Skype, but unfortunately we were unable to do that. So she's very sorry not to be here because, as you all know, this is an exciting event to be at. Not being an expert on this, I felt that there were greater experts that I should turn to. So I decided to do a research study, being a researcher. So we did an anonymous survey. Well, not so anonymous. Friends and colleagues were sent this survey. And for any of you who are in the audience that received this, thank you very much for completing it. There were 3 questions. What are the challenges in conducting international collaboration in research? What are the rewards? And lastly, how important is each of the following, and you'll see this in a minute, for conducting successful international research? We had 16 respondents, and luckily the statistics made it easy, with 8 coming from high-income countries and 8 from lower and middle-income countries. And these are, here I show the challenges. And the first thing I want to point out is that actually they don't get very high. The challenges only go to moderately challenging, not extremely challenging. But you can see that administrative and local and things to do with regulations and policies were the ones that were the most challenges in doing international research, followed by things to do with entering into a true collaboration, which we can obviously think of as being quite difficult at times, and then budgetary issues, distribution of funds, all that sort of thing. But other things like social cultural differences and personnel issues were less of a problem. Ethical issues, which I thought might be quite high, it comes up again and again, were not considered to be too much of a challenge. Data security and equipment, apart from not being able to get Aisha through Skype today, equipment is generally not considered to be a challenge, and that speaks, I think, to the modern day era. But when you look at the high versus the low income countries, you can see that it's the lower and middle income countries that have more of a problem with these administrative regulations and policy types of problems within their countries, which was a surprise to me because I feel I have a lot of difficulties in this type of context, but it is in the lower and middle income countries that actually are more pressed in this sort of situation. Other than that, though, you can see that, in fact, the experience is similar between those who are leading the projects in the lower and middle income country compared to those with the high income country. So the next question is, what are the extent, to what extent has involvement in international research been rewarding to you? And unlike the challenges, just look at where these are. These are all extremely rewarding, very rewarding to extremely rewarding. It's conducting research that will benefit the local community, not the research at large that actually gets the highest, is the most rewarding for us. Making new and long-lasting friendships. I was delighted to see that that was up there because it's certainly been very true for me in experiencing. And then we get down to learning about research process and then advancing knowledge more generally and also working together with others on something important. These are obviously things that are valued way out over the end there. Whereas and let me just go on to the next thing, because showing the differences between the two countries, once again, between high-income and low-income countries, there's not very much difference in our attitudes, our feelings in response to this. Although you will see that learning about research processes and collaborations and helping build research capacity where it's existed is obviously something that is more valued by those living in the lower and middle income countries. This is the next question. How important is each of the following statements for conducting a successful international research project? And leadership that is respectful of differences, and this was actually differences in culture and differences in systems. You can see that it's almost right at the very end of being extremely important. And then ensuring reciprocal and mutually beneficial building capacity, understanding expectations of all partners, being able to satisfy individual as well as shared objectives, were all things that are considered to be very important, or extremely important, I should say, in achieving a successful international research partnership. Whereas some of these other things, I will say these were put into it just because we wanted to see if there was a real scale here. Ensuring equal opportunity to travel, making sure everyone on the team is a nice person. Those are not the things that are considered to be really successful in international research. Once again, not much difference between the views of those in the lower and middle income countries and those in the high income countries. And this leadership that is respectful of differences really shines out there. So that interested me, this idea that leadership that is respectful of differences in countries. And so, being a researcher, I turned to study number 2. And if you thought there was no rigor in my prior study, how about this one? N of 2. So I turned to these anonymous individuals, and these were what they were asked. You're about to go into a meeting to meet someone who wants to collaborate on an international research project. What might your impression be before meeting him? What might you feel? What are your expectations? This is asked of individuals in a lower and middle income, I'll say a middle income country. All right. They're told that this person is from the USA. What was the responses? Be a knowledgeable person, but Americans think they know it all. I will have to stand my ground. He will only be here for a few days until he heads off to the Kruger National Park. This is referred to as research tourism. Actually, he's not American. He's British. He'd be knowledgeable, but would not expect him to prescribe actions. I would wonder if his forefathers fought in the Anglo-Boer War. You know, that really is the vestiges of colonialism, and we need to be aware of that. I would be worried about the quality of my second language, something I hadn't thought about. And then I'd have to remind myself not to make jokes about the Queen. These are real responses from my N of 2. No, it's not from the UK. It's from Trinidad and Tobago. Well, the first response I got about that is, I'd have to Google map it. He may be an equal and will ask for advice. I would expect discussions about challenges in developing countries. There would be a focus on positive, optimistic aspects of our work. Very different. And then I tried to remember the title of that movie about bobsledding team from Trinidad and Tobago. It was actually Jamaica. Very different responses for these three people. But these are one person. This is me. Born and grew up in Trinidad and Tobago. British and educated in the UK. And now American and working in America. Unconscious biases are social stereotypes about certain groups of people that individuals form outside their own conscious awareness. We all hold these. They're more prevalent than conscious prejudices and often incompatible with one's own conscious values. But our brains are hardwired to make unconscious decisions. If we didn't, we couldn't function because we make so many in the day. It affects everything from what we choose from a menu or who we elect to run the next meeting. In conducting international research, it's helpful for us to recognize our own unconscious biases, to accept them, perhaps talk about them, and even laugh about them. This is my opportunity to thank all my collaborators in international research over the years. Some of them you will recognize from these pictures, and then there are many, many, many more, and I thank them all for adding to my life and the value of my work. Thank you.